Hello YouTube, it's Sunday, January the 18th, which means it's time for another episode of Frooglesim News. Now, being that we're only just about 3 weeks into January, and we've had all the products that narrowly missed the Christmas release being released in early January, it's actually a slow news week this week, but we'll do our very best. The video you're watching at below is another DCS video. Matt Wagner, the series producer of DCS, uploaded this video showing power up and takeoff in the upcoming MiG-15 by Belsim Tech in, of course, DCS World 2 and the Nevada test range. Now, the MiG-15 is very interesting. It first flew in 1947 and bears much in common visually with the Sabre. The NATO codename is unfortunately Faggot. But anyway, in the Korean War, the MiG-15 went head-to-head with the Sabre. This version from Belsim Tech is due out in February. It contains a fully interactive cockpit, and of course, missions will pit this aircraft up against the Sabre within DCS World. It has accurate modelling of the instruments, weapons, engine, as well as fuel and electrical systems, which is kind of cool. The video is very interesting. It does give us a nice sneak peek into what is involved in startup and taxiing this. Taxiing is actually particularly interesting because you turn the aircraft by holding in the brake paddle on the joystick and then moving the rudder pedals. Lots of interesting details in this as well, like attention to detail on wing posts that extend when the gear is down and retracted and all that good stuff. Well worth a watch. There is a link to the video in the show notes below. The MiG-15 from Belsim Tech is available in public beta next month, but you can pre-order it now at Eagle's website for $39.99. Next up, CARADO have just this week released their Cessna Citation II S550. It's a classic example of a private executive jet and is very familiar to a lot of people because this aircraft has been in production now since 1984. The Cessna Citation II S550 has a 2,000-mile range, a service ceiling of 43,000 feet, and thus makes it a great small alternative to Boeing's and Airbus's. CARADO's version comes in 6 liveries with 4K resolution textures, a universal FMS just like in Majestic's Q400, and MFD. Also includes improved lighting over and above what CARADO have done on all their previous aircraft. Unfortunately, the documentation is a little sparse, as always with CARADO aircraft, covering just really emergency procedures, normal procedures, but also includes a couple of guides for working with the EFIS and the MFDs. The CARADO Cessna Citation II S550 is probably the catchiest name of an aircraft ever, and you can download it from the link at CARADO's website in the show notes below. Price is $44.95. Now, perhaps most interesting in this week's news is Avsim published an interview with Tim Gatlin of DOVEL. Now, obviously, it's talking about DOVEL's plans with FSX and what's going on, what they're up to, how they got where they currently are at. The usual stuff that we've actually seen in other interviews with DOVEL. The curious bit, though, is when the interview starts talking about republishing, or more to the point, when it starts posing questions that DOVEL answer with the word republishing. DOVEL are very keen in this interview to point out that they are republishing FSX. There was a question about modifying the core sim, and the answer to that was refer to Microsoft, since we are really only republishing the sim. When they were asked what can developers expect from FSX Steam and subsequent developments, again DOVEL answered by saying, we are simply republishing, we're not changing relationships between MS and third parties. And they then went on in the interview to talk about involving developers in the new sim they are working on. The whole interview continues like this. It's actually a very interesting read, but they rounded out with an emphatic statement that, this is from DOVEL, we don't actually own Flight Simulator. We are licensed to release it on Steam and develop products based on it. So those of you who are hoping to see a 64-bit FSX, it's not going to happen. Those of you who are hoping to see DirectX 11 in FSX, it's not going to happen. DOVEL have made it extremely clear in this very interesting article over on Avsim that they are merely caretakers of the product and their focus is on developing something new. Head on over to the interview at Avsim at the link in the show notes below for more information. Still with DOVEL, they did release this week, I think it was, their first DLC for FSX Steam Edition, which is around the world in 80 flights. This is the first of, we expect, a whole bunch of DLC from DOVEL, and it's actually a re-release of a very old package for FSX. The original was actually developed by a colleague of mine, Jane Whittaker at PC Pilot. It's a collection of flights, not missions, covering 400 hours of flying time over 35,000 miles, which basically takes you around the world in 80 flights. Also includes a classic 1937 Lockheed Electra 10E that you can undertake those flights in. It is available right now on Steam for $16.99. Interestingly, perhaps this sets a bar for DOVEL in terms of releasing or re-releasing old content on Steam. Really delivering content to the whole bunch of new users who picked up FSX on Steam, who've never flown FSX before. Very simple, very low detail, very easy to get into and get up and running with. Not necessarily a bad thing. Check it out at the link on Steam in the show notes below. As always, if you want to buy it though, it's going to cost you $16.99. At least it will until Steam have a sale. Finally, I don't have a lot of footage for this actually very, very cool and important piece of news. Multi-crew experience is now available for X-Plane. Multi-crew experience, it's an unkind way of saying it, but it is really could be thought of as a poor man's FS to crew. It basically gives you voice control and a voice-driven co-pilot in any aircraft you care to name on FSX and Prepared, now available for X-Plane. It appears to be a separate purchase and product from Ultimate Edition MCE, unfortunately. So if you are an existing Ultimate Edition owner, you're going to need to repurchase it for for X-Plane. But that's not a big deal though, as I'm sure quite a lot of work went into creating this whole new edition. Out of the box, multi-crew experience for X-Plane supports fully the Flight Factor 757, the JAR A320, the FlyJSim 732, the FlyJSim Q400, as well as the SSG E170 and E190. Beyond that, it will also support all default X-Plane aircraft up to 4 engines. I have not seen this yet. I do have the original multi-crew experience for FSX, and that itself was customizable. You could actually set that thing up to work with any aircraft you've got, whether it's supported out of the box or not. Supported aircraft, though, tend to come with deeper integration with MCE and a much better experience overall in terms of using it with those aircraft. Check it out at the link in the show notes below. It is actually well worth a look if it's anything like the FSX version, because it does give you that FS to crew kind of feeling in any aircraft you care to name, and is obviously a lot cheaper than buying a new version of FS to crew whenever a new aircraft is made available for it. Anyway, that's it for this short news week. As always, my name is Frugal, and I will see you all next week.